Hey, what's up everybody? I am checking in, I guess at the beginning of day 2 of Sparkfun AVC, but day 1 was a little more stressful than I thought it would be. So I got there early, I got the robots prepped, and then when it came time to actually put them in for safety inspection, I found out Hellhound was having some issues. The first was me being stupid, I forgot to plug the battery in when I went in for safety. And the second, I did something and I caused the weapon to start jamming up. Basically, I tried to add some spacers to keep the blade tight, and I guess it was just too tight. So I had to abandon that. Hellhound ended up being exactly on weight. I weighed it at home and it was half a pound over, and I weighed it at work on a better scale, it was half a pound under. The scale here read almost exactly at 12 pounds, so can't argue with that. Yeah, I think I'm just completely in the dark in this shot, but I mean, look at that behind me. For someone who lives in Florida and doesn't get to see any change of elevation in the environment, that's a beautiful view behind me right now. But I'm about to go get breakfast and get ready for day 2. Today is going to be Beetles, so Demon Spawn will be fighting today. We'll see how that goes. And this hotel room has a TV that has like YouTube built into it. So I've just been watching like robot fights while I'm in here waiting to go back to robot fights. It's kind of amazing.
Most of you guys are here, so we'll get this started. Okay, first of all, I want to thank you all for coming. Who's the first timer here? Awesome. Woo! That's a lot. Who's a veteran? All right. See the veterans here? These guys are going to kind of watch over you. They should. Guys, veterans, watch over the noobs. We're going to make this a good, safe, fun. We're going to break some things. All right. I did this in 10 minutes. Awesome. Get back to your robots, get ready!
Alright, it is September 8th, 2018, and Sparkfun AVC Day 2 is about to begin, and the first fights are happening in just about 5 minutes.
Alright, here we go! 3, 2, 1, fight! Yeah!
Demon Spawn's first matchup was against Unknown Avenger, a wedge with a clamping arm. I used my horizontal spinner, but very soon into the match I realized there was a problem. One side of drive was really not cooperating, and despite my weapon continuing to spin, I wasn't really able to bring it to bear and ended up just getting pushed around the arena a lot. Eventually Unknown Avenger got me to the corner and really had me pinned. I didn't have much ability to move at all at this point, but I slowly kind of crab walked out of the corner. He was able to get under me and do kind of a full box rush, slamming me into the wall, and then I kind of launched myself over top of him with my spinner. He then knocked me back up into the air and got his little clamping mechanism in between my disc and the housing that holds it onto the robot, and then that ended up disabling my weapon, and he was basically just able to push me around at will. He got me in the other corner of the arena at the end of the fight, and I was totally unable to move. So Demon Spawn was counted out, and I lost the match.
Alright, trying the damage reports a little differently and doing it right here live at the event. And you can see Unknown Avenger managed to disconnect my belts from the pulley. There's a little lifting arm on the top, and it just got the belt in the perfect way to put it right below the pulley there. And I think in doing that, he kind of expanded out my weapon assembly and more or less high-centered the robot. So my wheels were kind of spinning, but not really on the ground. Something else is up because they definitely weren't spinning continuously. So something's jamming up the drive system. But yeah, that was kind of bad. But it got some decent hits in, so I'm excited to rewatch the footage and see those hits again. Looks like it blunted the tooth a little bit too. But yeah,
get this guy fixed up for the loser's bracket. Demon Spawn's next fight was against the vertical spinner Spinderella, and I went with my saw blade attachment. But early on, I realized that there is a flaw with the forks on the saw blade attachment, where when the robot kind of wobbles due to the saw blade arm, the forks get stuck up at an angle where they're no longer being an effective wedge. So I had a really hard time getting under the front wedge of Spinderella. Eventually, I kind of got it over to the corner and brought the saw down on its titanium front end, but I wasn't able to do much damage. And then Spinderella was able to flip me over on my back, which I filmed terribly, and I was not able to self-right. I realized after the match that in an attempt to straighten out the forks, I had adjusted the trim on my servo arm so that the saw sat slightly forward from where it normally does, and I think I might have been able to actually self-right if I would have just had the presence of mind to adjust the trim and bring the servo arm back just a little bit further, but I was counted out for Demon Spawn's second loss of the tournament. So I don't think I caught it on video, but right at the end of that fight, Demon Spawn started smoking. I think the servo blew. Basically, it looks like 2 leads. Ooh, that is toasty. That's really toasty. But the leads that go into the servo for power got ripped out at some point, and then have now just become one single lead. They welded themselves together, and yeah. So fortunately, it looks like the servo smoked before the battery really got much. The battery's not even warm. But Demon Spawn is out. That's kind of disappointing. Oh, there's so much resistance in that servo arm now. That's kind of funny. So next up for Demon Spawn was the 3-pound rumble. I went with the horizontal attachment. Someone asked before the rumble if we were going to do 3 minutes or 5 minutes. I think I commented that I didn't think we'd even need 3. And if you watch the video in its full length, it's 2 minutes and 40 seconds. It was pretty crazy. Demon Spawn got knocked to the side pretty fast. The weapon stopped spinning pretty early, and my one-sided drive was acting up yet again. But there were a lot of spinners in this round, and a lot of damage being done. A few bots were kind of knocked out pretty quickly, myself included. But a lot of them just kept going and kept chewing up each other. And there's really nasty vertical in there, and a couple nasty horizontals. And after not too long, the robot Black Hole ended up winning, which is a miniaturized clone of the robot Crazy Susan, which I never thought I'd see a miniaturized version of, pretty much ever. It is September 9th, 2018. It is time for day 2 of battles at Sparkfun AVC, day 3 of the event itself. And yeah. Yesterday did not go as planned. Demon Spawn did not win any of its fights. It was not a particularly good day of fighting for me, but it was fun, so it's all that really matters. And today, I gotta finally test out Hellhound. Put it in the arena last night, and finally spun it up to full speed, and it was pretty impressive. But with it just being an aluminum bar and not nearly the thickness of bar I wanted to use, I'm a little nervous as to what's going to happen when it finally hits something. If the brackets don't change from what they were yesterday, I should be fighting something that's not going to hurt too bad. But I don't know. I think it's going to be a wedge with a lot of magnets, which might actually hurt a lot. So Hellhound's first fight was up against Grand, a very powerful magnet wedge that just had ridiculous downforce, and on the very first impact, the entire motor housing that sits above the blade just warped horribly, basically throwing the belt, making the weapon just useless and letting it flap in the breeze. So I really had no other choice but to just go after Grand to try to hit him and hope he broke down. Grand threw me in the corner so hard at one point, Hellhound nearly flipped over, but managed to get back on its wheels. And there wasn't a whole lot I can do. This version of Hellhound does not have any kind of feeder wedge. It's something I hope to rectify in the future, but I didn't have any hope of trying to push this robot in the least. I did get stuck on the seam of the floor at one point, and he freed me, and then just kind of continued to bash me against the walls. I was just trying to be as aggressive as I could for whatever that was worth. But at one point, Grand actually ended up throwing one of the pulleys that he had. It was a 3D printed pulley that was going to one side of his drive, and that fell off and kind of hindered the one side of his drivetrain. And for some reason, like an idiot, I went chasing that across the arena and slammed it into the wall, because it was the only part of his robot I guess I could push, but ended up getting kind of stuck on the floor over there as well. And I noticed my drivetrain really started lagging at this point. And when I went back in to engage Grand again, while he was having trouble moving, I ended up just kind of grinding to a halt and stopped working. And a little plume of smoke escaped the robot there at the very end, which had me pretty worried because I didn't have a whole lot of spare parts on hand.
All right, so this is Hellhound after one hit. First impact basically completely twisted my motor mount up here and disconnected the belt, tore all that up. So I was left as a push bot, which this thing is not designed to be in the least. And somewhere towards the end of the match, I ended up throwing the chain over here and jammed the side of drive, and I saw some wisps of smoke, so I'm guessing there is a speed controller in here that is no longer a working speed controller, but I'm gonna try to tear this apart and see what I can make out of it.
So instead of fight commentary here, I'm going to do some repair commentary, because for whatever reason I filmed myself fixing the robot. I was able to determine pretty quickly that it was actually one of my drive motors that burned out, not the speed controller, and that was fortunately one of the few parts I had replacements for, so it was actually a pretty easy fix. I just kind of desoldered the motor that was burnt out, swapped in a brand new motor and gearbox. It did require taking apart that entire side of drive, but it could have been a heck of a lot worse. Fixing the weapon motor mount was a little bit more of a challenge. I did not have the parts on hand to really do that in the pits, but David Small from Team Small Robots hooked me up with a piece of titanium that was significantly stronger than the aluminum I had been using previously, and I was able to kind of build a brand new base plate for that mounting system that was a lot more rigid than what I had originally built. So I owe him big time for helping me get this robot back together and back functioning again for round 2. I also ended up destroying most of my drill bits because I had to do this pretty quick, and I spent, I think, a couple hours, it felt like at least, repairing this robot. So all of the drilling into the titanium was done very quickly and burnt out the ends of a lot of my drill bits, but they were kind of getting old anyway. And the other thing I did to try to help the robot from seizing up the drivetrain again was to add an additional set of links to the one side, I forget if it was left or right, but basically one side of the drive had a very tight drive chain on it, and the other one had a nice amount of slack, and I was really thinking that maybe it was the tight chain that had caused the one motor to burn up, so I tried to go with a little looser chain to try to make it a little easier for the motor to spin. Next up, Hellhound was up against Frankenhammer, a Thwackbot, and I did twice as well as I did against Grand. I got 2 hits in before the weapon broke. Basically, this time, when I rebuilt the weapon motor mount, I hadn't measured it quite right, so the belt ended up being a lot looser than it should have been, and after a couple hits, it popped right off. I believe I did do some damage to Frankenhammer. I cut into some of his more exposed parts on the backside of the robot. I don't think I really did anything to that hammer, but in the process of losing the weapon belt, I also ended up losing one of my drive chains. I believe the one that I had just loosened. So now the robot only had 3-wheel drive. So I wasn't really all that maneuverable. And then I went over to a section of the floor that had seen better days after a day and a half of fighting, and the robot got high center. Hellhound really doesn't have a whole lot of ground clearance, but I figured 4-wheel drive would be okay enough to let it not get high centered, but it did. And somewhere in that process, I burned out yet another drive motor. So that could have contributed. I could have really just been down to 1-wheel drive. And there's really no need to watch any part of that fight again right now. But because Ben from Team Panic stuck his GoPro in the arena and filmed some inside the arena footage for me, I'm gonna play that right here.
belt. I mean, everything else is still intact. The titanium held up, thank you. Chain fell off on this side and completely fell off on this side. So yeah, something else was smoking, guessing another drive motor. Get it cracked open and see.
I was told to get B-roll of goats, so I'm getting B-roll of goats. So we're not quite done with the second day of fights, but it's getting real empty in here, real fast.
So that was how my fights went from Sparkfun AVC. And if you're looking at it just from the perspective of fights, I didn't do very well at all. No wins between either robot. A lot of damage and lessons learned here on Hellhound. But winning fights is not the only thing with these robots. And while my record doesn't exactly show anything great, I had an amazing time at this event. If you watch this channel, you know I mostly compete throughout the Southeast United States, and one of the highlights last year of going out to AVC was getting to meet all these people that were more West Coast or Central US, and just get to meet builders and compete with people that I normally don't have the opportunity to. And this year, it was great seeing some of those people from last year again. It was great meeting some new people, and it was just a really, really good time. Also, I don't know if I've shown this off in a video before, but my sister and her husband made me a Team Cerberus coffee mug, which is epic. So, trying this new format for the video where I try to film more at the event itself. Obviously, you kind of saw the damage report, especially on Demon Spawn. I think I didn't mention with Demon Spawn that at the end of that last rumble, I somehow managed to end up tightening the lock nut at the top of the weapon assembly, which is what killed the weapon partway through, or very early into that rumble. Hellhounds, I mentioned in that last clip that I think I smoked another motor in Hellhound, but honestly, I haven't bothered to test it. There was no 12-pound rumble that day, so I never really bothered to see if anything was really burnt out. I figured I might as well just figure it out at home, and I have yet to tear it down. And before I get to what's next for these robots, I will just kind of wrap up the event. As I said, it was really fun. The venue was interesting. It was a barn, and there were a bunch of goats in the back, as evident by my goat B-roll earlier in this video. But I think overall it was a pretty nice venue to have a robot event. One of the things I really like too is that Casey made the brackets and the schedule available on his website. So instead of having to go check a computer to see who was up and everything like that, he had a Google Doc for each weight class showing when robots were kind of expected up. They had the brackets out on Challenge, and to me it made everything a lot easier. They still did have to do the typical pit runner thing and go grab people, but more or less it was all okay. But honestly, it really helped a lot to be able to have access to that and to not have to ask people questions about who was up when. The only thing I would really hope improves next year at AVC is the commentating on the fights. They did a live stream the first day on Saturday, and Saturday was most weight classes. It was basically everything. I think it was really everything except for the 12-pounders fought on Saturday. The Ants finished up Sunday morning, but 12-pounders were exclusively Sunday. And the stream wasn't set up for Sunday, which is kind of a bummer. I would have liked to be able to get on the stream with this guy, but no such luck. But one of the weird things I found was that they had the stream playing over a speaker in the pits, but it was kind of centralized. They only had one speaker. I can't blame them for not having like a whole speaker arrangement, but I never heard any of the commenting on the fights as they were happening. It was just kind of silence and robots fighting and not even like announcements of who was in the box type thing. And then I went back and I watched the stream, and let's just say it wasn't the best. I understand these are Sparkfun people that are trying to do this, but not only were they not included enough about robot combat to really make very meaningful commentary, but I know one of my fights, I think it was like my second fight with Demon Spawn, they were just talking about cats the entire time and not really saying much about the robot fight they were watching. So I hope the stream improves next year. I liked the idea of what they were going for. It had a kind of an esports vibe to what they were trying to set up, but I think they just need maybe an expert or two in robot combat to be in there with the Sparkfun people to maybe try to drive the conversation the right direction. So what's next for these guys? I am going to be very busy in this next month. Besides these robots, I am setting up an ant weight tournament at work. My boss is a fan of the show, and he asked what it would take to do a robot tournament at work. So basically I convinced him to buy 4 Viper kits and let my coworkers build those kits, decide on weapon options from FingerTech, which I think I'm gonna have to fudge a little bit because everything's been out of stock for a while. So I'm gonna have to kind of fudge the parts and rebuild the weapon kits mostly on my own. And I've also been tasked with building an arena. It's gonna be a pretty tiny arena. It's gonna be like 4x4 by like 2.5. So feet, obviously, but yeah, it's gonna be a pretty tiny arena, but hopefully we can have some fun with it. And that should be happening early to mid-October. I still don't have an official date yet. If I can film stuff for that, I will. I'm not really sure what I'm going to be allowed to do because it is work, and I definitely don't want to overstep my bounds where I work. But it's just really cool that we're able to do this. We're not a robotics company in the least. We're a software company that has nothing to do with robotics at all. So I think it's really cool that I have the opportunity to bring my hobby to work and share it with everybody. And then after that is Maker Faire Orlando, which is what I'm really excited about. I have plans to completely rebuild the chassis of Hellhound. I'm replacing the drive motors because they are definitely way too underpowered. What I'm thinking about switching over to is I already have the P60 gearboxes that I've been running in F13, and I'm gonna make those to a 300 size motor instead of the 500 size. Because it doesn't need to be, push bot, it just needs to go. It's probably going to be powerful enough like that. And then that'll be direct drive to the wheels, or to 2 of the wheels, and then I'll just chain drive the front. I'm going to probably get the frame water jet cut is my goal, so that it can be a little more precise, because I think part of my imprecision in building this is what caused the chain drive to have trouble. Weapon motor staying the same. I'm hoping I have weight enough to go with the thicker weapon bar and to add the steel teeth that I intended to add to it in there. And if I can make enough weight out of the new frame, I'm hoping to increase the battery capacity at least. 2200 milliamp hour did not seem to do the job. I never got a full fight with this robot, and definitely never had a full fight with the weapon spinning, but charging the battery after the fight leads me to believe that I'm gonna need more capacity than I was running in here, especially when moving the bigger drive motors, though those drive motors could have been nearly stalling the whole time based on how much I smoked them, so maybe bigger drive motors will actually draw a little less current. We'll see. But I know the prop drive 5050 is a bit power hungry, so definitely need something to feed that. But the plus side is, for Florida events and for what this thing's going to be mostly competing in until probably a year from now, if I bring it back to AVC next year, I have another 3 pounds to play with because it's a 15-pound class instead of the 12. So I have a little more fun with this guy. I'm excited to improve it. This was very much a learning experience getting this thing in the arena for the first time. I knew there were problems. I found there were other problems I hadn't anticipated. So hopefully get this guy improved and really combat worthy. Demon Spawn I don't plan on changing a whole lot with, outside of just trying to make it a little more reliable. The other main issue with it was that the spacer that was supposed to be in this upper section for the weapon attachment kind of got removed, and I keep forgetting to bring something to the events that will let me kind of basically put something in its place. I want to prevent the horizontal spinner attachment from bottoming out the way it has been. I need to get something so that the saw attachment will push the forks to the floor. The lifter attachment's really just more of a wedge than anything else, so I don't think that really needs too much work. And I'd like to get the vertical spinner down to weight so I could actually use it. Oh, I just realized this was sitting here the whole time and I forgot about it. This was the former base plate for the weapon motor mount that got all twisted up on impact. You can see, I mean, it's really thin aluminum, but it literally just ripped itself apart. And I don't think that was from hitting itself, because it ripped in the opposite direction that the blade was spinning. So it was literally the torque of the motor did a lot of that damage. For Maker Faire Orlando, I also want to bring in 2 other robots. I'm kind of thinking it may be too much, but one's a joke and one is easy enough. I am planning to rebuild Son of Gorgor. I bought a brand new toy that the whole robot's based off of, because I lost a lot of the teeth. at the last event, and I got some new electronics that should hopefully make the robot lighter and let me cram more stuff into it and kind of tweak the design. I obviously want to keep it goofy and dinosaur-like, but I want to do a couple things to try to make it a little more competitive so that it's not quite so much of just a novelty robot. But my other robot is going to be a novelty robot. I'm not going to get too into it right now. A couple people I've talked to at previous events know what it is, but yeah, it's a goofy, stupid robot I've been wanting to build for a long time, and I really want to bring it to Maker Faire Orlando and be stupid with it. And let's just put it this way, I'm probably going to need 2 other drivers to help me with this thing, so I may be grabbing some additional people at Maker Faire to try to help me drive the robot. But I think I've rambled on long enough in this video. Let me know in the comments if you guys are liking this new format. I'm trying something a little new. I kind of half put it in my last Dragon Con video, and then I'm really kind of going all out with it here. So let me know if this is working for you guys. Before I go, I just want to say thank you to everyone who put on Sparkfun AVC, especially Casey and his family, and Zach, and the whole Sparkfun crew. And thank you to everyone who helped me get these robots up and running in the pits, especially David from Team Small Robots and Ben from Team Panic were kind of on either side of me during the event, helping me get these things operational when I needed assistance and helping film and stuff like that. So much appreciate that. Speaking of which, before I forget, go to Ben's channel, Team Panic, and check out the podcast we all did. It was myself, Ben, David, and Robert from Crippling Depression fame. I always forget his actual robot team name because his YouTube isn't his robot team name. But yeah, we all did kind of a podcast kind of thing outside of the events talking about what we did to prep for AVC. I will link it in the description down below, but definitely go check it out and check out all those guys' channels. I'm sure if you're subscribed to me and watching my stuff, you're probably subscribed to them, but if not, go fix that. But anyway, that's all I've got for this event report, and I will see you guys in the next video.